Alright guys, how's it going? Welcome back. Today I'm in this 2015 Jeep Cherokee, known in the Jeep world as the KL model. I've not filmed with many Jeeps on this channel. The last one I filmed with was a 2009, I think, or 2010 Jeep Cherokee, which wasn't the best car, to be honest. Acres of plastic and cheap, flimsy trim didn't make it the most appealing of purchases. Because of that model, when I bought this new shape Jeep the other day, well, I didn't exactly have the bar set high. Especially since Jeep now is owned by Fiat, I really wasn't expecting anything special. But this has genuinely surprised me. It's a pretty well sorted car. Alright, so when you first get in it behind the wheel, some of the plastics aren't the best, and the build quality on certain areas isn't very high. I mean, take for instance the master window switch here. There is a little bit of movement there, a movement that you wouldn't necessarily get on a German car. But in the Jeep's defence, you really have to look around for those cheaper areas. Whereas in Jeeps of old, they made no effort whatsoever to disguise the horrible cheap plastics. So all the areas that you touch straight away, like the steering wheel, the grab handles, the comically large gear selector, they all feel quite nice. If you covered up the badge on the steering wheel, it'd be hard to tell what I was in. You would just know that you were in something half decent. There are also loads of optional extras. You get this big touchscreen infotainment screen here which controls everything. It's pretty quick to respond. You've got DAB radio, you can turn on the heated seats or the ventilated seats. You can even turn on the mirror dimmer from here. Quite a clever system actually. But it's a nice bright and airy place to be. There's plenty of room around you, plenty of visibility. Everything's easy to reach and nice to touch. One thing I have noticed though, Jeep are trying to cash in on their heritage because everywhere you look, there are nods to its history. So you've got silhouettes there of the Willis Jeep on the windscreen. You've got the little date stamp on the steering wheel which says since 1941, which is how long Jeeps have been around. I should hate all that, but I actually quite like it. It gives you something to do while you're sat bored in traffic. It's almost like a game for the driver and passengers. It just kind of confirms that this car's got a bit of personality and a bit of sense of humour. It doesn't take itself too seriously. This model Cherokee has been around since 2014, which means by now used prices have taken a massive hit, so you can pick them up for well under 10 grand, which I think is an awful lot of car for that sort of money. And it's a little bit of a left field choice. It's something that you probably wouldn't consider if you're in the market for a small or medium SUV. I wouldn't advise that you buy one of these new because they're very expensive. You'd be better off buying a Volvo XC60 or a BMW X3. For a top spec limited model like this, new prices were over 30 grand, which is just craziness. But used, like I say, you can pick them up around the £10,000 mark, and cheaper depending on the mileage. So thanks to depreciation, it's made this car quite appealing. I mean seriously, the Jeep Cherokee has done a better job of losing money over the years than Nick Leeson. So when you think you can pick them up now for around £10,000, when you consider they were over £30,000 new, it's quite a bargain. There are several models to choose from. This one's the high-spec limited model. They also do a Trailhawk model which is geared up for more off-roading. Now Jeep prefers to sell all its optional extras grouped together in one sort of trim level. So you can't really specify these cars how you would like. You've just got to pick whichever trim model you can afford and you get those extras that come with that. So if you go for a top spec limited model, it really does come with everything that you could possibly want and more. So I've got heated and ventilated front seats, I've got sat-nav, DAB, reverse camera, you get several USB points throughout the car. The audio system's very good. Personally, I would recommend that you go for a limited model because you'll be quite impressed with all its spec. Traditionally, American cars sold in Europe are famous for giving you a lot of car for your money. Now usually that's because they're covering up what is basically a terrible car. But that's not the case with the new Jeep Cherokee, because I think they've made a car here that you'd be quite happy owning. It'll sit here quite happily at 70 miles an hour. This really is where this car's made for long motorway cruises, because you get this 9-speed automatic gearbox, which around town is a little bit easily confused. But on a motorway run, it's quite smooth, there's plenty of torque from its 2-litre diesel engine. It's a very comfortable car, the ride isn't too harsh or stiff. The boot space isn't the best. You would expect a larger boot from a car of this size, but for most people it's probably quite adequate. It's just when you start to compare it to a lot of its rivals, it starts to look a little bit small. This one's got the power lift tailgate, which it took me a while to figure out where the button was to close the tailgate because it's not where you'd expect. It's not at the top. It's round on the left-hand side, which I thought was a little bit strange, and I thought, to be honest, it was just typical of Jeep or Fiat Jeep trying to save money. But by putting the button to close the tailgate on the side of the boot, it's actually a very clever idea. Normally when you've got your hands filled with shopping bags, you've then got to either put the bags down to press the button on the top or lift the heavy bags up with you while you press the button, like one of those necklace chaps on Venice Beach. But by placing it at a lower height on the side, it means you don't have to struggle at all. There are just some subtle touches with the car like that make you think that the designers have actually put some thought into it. The parcel shelf's very easy to remove. The rear seats fold down in seconds really easily, and even this front seat folds down in half like you'd expect on a Ford Transit or something, which is perfect if you're carrying large items. Lots of other cars don't do that, and I just can't understand why, because it's such a good idea. Everything with this car is just really user-friendly, or family-friendly. It just gives you the impression that it's been designed by somebody who knows what they're doing. The ride's very good, it's quite a comfortable car. That's helped by these big padded, comfortable leather seats. It absorbs the bumps in the road well. I'm not crashing around like I would be in an M Sport X3. Overall, interior space isn't bad for a small SUV either. There's plenty of room in the back, even if you're on the taller side. There's a scallop shape in the roof, which means that even taller passengers will be quite comfortable back there. Of course, you do get the transmission tunnel running through the centre of the car, so that can be a little bit annoying if you've got somebody sat in the middle seat, but there's no getting around that. The steering feels quite nice. It's quite weighty, which is unusual for a Jeep. They're normally very light and vague. It just feels like a European car designed for European roads. Of course, because it's a high-riding Jeep, you do get a little bit of body roll, but it's not as bad as you'd think. You get electric seats too, which are heated and ventilated, and they're really quite comfortable. You get lumbar support too. That's one thing that the Americans are pretty good at, making a comfortable leather seat. They're really quite padded and thick. You just wouldn't get that from BMW. Another thing that Americans are good at is cup holders, and on that front this scores well, because you've got plenty of space here for your Big Gulp or your Mountain Dew. There are also lots of storage compartments in this car, which I like. Just makes it really family friendly. You get storage in the door cards, you get quite a large area here. Under the bonnet is a 2-litre 4-cylinder 170 horsepower turbo diesel engine, which is made by Fiat. You might understandably raise your eyebrows at the fact that it's made by Fiat, but you shouldn't, because Fiat have been making engines for years, and generally the diesels are pretty strong. They use them in a whole host of things, and they're pretty good. They also offer a detuned version of this engine with, I think, 138 horsepower, but you're better off with the higher horsepower model, because in a car of this weight and size, well, you shouldn't really turn down extra horses. They also offer a 2.2 litre turbo diesel engine and a 3.2 litre V6 petrol, but I can't imagine them being very popular in Europe. This 2 litre diesel engine does a pretty good job. It's similar to the 2 litre Ingenium engine that I test drove in the XF recently. It's not going to blow you away, it's not a Bugatti Veyron, but for every day sort of driving around, it's pretty good. It never feels like it's lacking in the trouser department. It can sound a little bit noisy when it's pushed, but you know, what 4-cylinder diesel engine doesn't? So the road tax on this particular car, I should stop calling it road tax, shouldn't I? Because I keep getting ripped in the comments. It's not road tax, it hasn't been road tax since 1936. It's actually vehicle excise duty. So technically, yes, you're right, the VED on this car is £205 per year. So it's not too bad for an automatic diesel 4-wheel drive. They must have managed to get the emissions down. You can also buy this car as a front-wheel drive only, which is fine if you're not going to use it off-road. That will save you some money on road tax too, because they fall into the cheaper bracket. You'll end up getting a few extra miles per gallon out of it too. The Cherokee is offered with a 6-speed manual gearbox, which is pretty good if you're towing, because this car will tow up to 2.5 tons. The model I'm in today uses a 9-speed automatic, which is my only bugbear with this car so far. It's just too easily confused. Every time I drive an 8 or 9-speed gearbox, I'm just left scratching my head, because most of the time the gearbox is scratching its head, doesn't know which gear to give you. And with this one, although when you get a move on it is fairly seamless, around town it appears to be clinging hold of the gears longer because it just doesn't know which gear to give you. On the upside of that, when you're on a motorway run in 9th gear, you're doing minimal revs, so you'll get in excess of 50 miles per gallon. That's imperial gallons, by the way, not US, so there is a difference there. But around town with this 2 litre diesel engine, you'll average 35 miles per gallon, and yeah, on a run, 52, 53. They're pretty decent figures. I like the gauge cluster too, it's all very crisp. And the fact that you've got this screen in the middle so that you can switch between menus. Just all very nice and easy to operate. There is a little bit of wind and road noise, but you're going to get that with a 4-wheel drive car. But it's not excessive. No, I think overall it would be very easy to live with. Styling wise, I think it looks quite classy. Now, I personally prefer my SUVs to be more boxy and squared off, but most aren't these days. But I think the Cherokee's done a good job. I don't really like the grille, because the fact that it's sort of bent now over the bonnet just looks a little bit weird. But I like the headlamps, they look nice and subtle. I like the styling from the rear too. They've made it look like it's got twin exhausts, which looks quite sporty. I like the privacy glass. And on this particular model, I like the grey colour with the dark wheels. Just looks quite rugged, but also looks quite modern. I like the fact that it's not a complete chrome fest either. Most American cars are. I don't know why they do that, it's very 90s. But I like the way it looks. I wouldn't be ashamed to see one sitting on my driveway by any means. For a smaller SUV, it looks quite rugged and butch. So what's it like to drive? Well, for a Cherokee, I think it's excellent. No, it's not as good to drive on road as a X3 or even a Q3. But yeah, for a Jeep, it's pretty good. It's comfortable, it rides well, the steering's good, the visibility's good. The driving position's excellent. Performance and consumption's pretty adequate. There are several different driving modes too which you can select. Right now I'm in auto. You can switch to snow or sport or sand or mud. Now that's the other thing with the Jeep that makes it a little bit more appealing than most of its rivals, because it's a proper off-roader. With a decent set of tyres on, this will go anywhere that a Discovery Sport will go. So if that's important to you because you live in a rural area, that's something else that the Jeep's got up its sleeve. They offer this Jeep with two different four-wheel drive systems. The cleverly named Active Drive 1 or the Active Drive 2. Now this one has the Active Drive 2 system, which basically just gives you the option of low range. It'll probably never get used, but it's nice to know it's there. Having driven this now for a few more hours, it's definitely better suited for longer runs. Once you get this up to 60 or 70 miles an hour, you just set the cruise control, and that's it, you don't have to worry again. It's perfectly comfortable and perfectly economical. It's also a very safe car, this. It scored well in all of its safety tests, and you get lots of extras to keep you safe, things like collision alert and lane assist. I'd rather keep all those bings and bongs turned off, to be honest, and just use my eyes and my brain. But it's a nice extra to have for those people that don't have one. There are a couple of negative things to tell you. When you first get in this, it will be a little bit confusing because it's a bit of a button fest. There are buttons and switches absolutely everywhere. So it will take you a day or two to figure out what everything does. If this was your only car, then I'm pretty sure you'd master it fairly quickly. But when you're jumping in and out of lots of different cars, it can be a little bit confusing. Reliability-wise, traditionally with Jeeps, once you turn a blind eye to the slightly subpar build quality, the fundamentals are usually pretty good. The engine and the gearboxes are usually alright. So long as you don't thrash the life out of them and service them regularly, they usually will last you. And I suspect this Jeep Cherokee is no different. No doubt you'll have the odd electronic warning message telling you that something's wrong. For example, today I've got a warning light telling me that my offside front tyre's low, which it isn't. It's quite a common issue that on American cars. Every single American car that I get in, there's always an issue with the tyre pressure monitoring system. I'd rather it just didn't have it. One thing to mention with Jeeps of old, here in the UK anyway, they were quite difficult to get parts for. Hopefully now it's owned by Fiat, parts are a little bit more accessible and cheaper. But yeah, Jeeps of old were quite difficult to source parts for. But generally speaking, I think if you look after them, they will be quite trusty servants. Overall though, I've been impressed with this Jeep Cherokee. You feel like you're in something interesting and characterful. And you can't say that about a lot of mid-size SUVs. I honestly thought with Fiat at the helm, Jeep didn't really have a chance. But I was wrong because they've actually made it feel more European. It actually feels now that it would be a sensible choice for somebody in the UK to buy a Jeep. I also think that Fiat have done a very good job at marketing new Jeeps because they're trying to appeal to just your average person on the street, not necessarily somebody who wants a hardcore four-wheel drive car. And every single time I've been to Italy recently, well, not recently, but every time I've been to Italy over the last few years, you see lots of Jeeps on the road. So something's working. I hope they succeed. I really do, because I think they're going in the right direction. So thanks once again for watching. Make sure you give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't done already. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'll leave the link below. If you've got any comments or questions, let me know, and I'll do my best to get back to you. So yeah, cheers guys. See you next time.